She publicly labeled him an assassin right on the floor of the congressional chamber, broadcasting the severe accusation live on television in front of an audience of 300 million Americans. Ilhan Omar boldly stood up from her seat during the State of the Union address, aimed her index finger directly at the sitting President of the United States, and shrieked at the top of her lungs. She repeatedly screamed, declaring loudly that he was both a murderer and a liar. Following that dramatic outburst, she promptly marched out of the room alongside Rashida Tlaib, who was conspicuously sporting a profane anti-ICE button pinned to her chest as if it were a prestigious Medal of Honor. Exactly 2 weeks following that incident, Donald Trump publicly challenged her to repeat those exact accusations straight to his face on a live television broadcast. He stipulated there could be no teleprompters, no staff members whispering in her ear, and absolutely no opportunity for her to storm out. She readily accepted his challenge, confidently believing she was marching into the most significant political fight of her entire career. She was absolutely correct about the magnitude of the fight. She just tragically miscalculated which side would emerge victorious. Smash that like button, because the events that unfolded next will undoubtedly go down in history as the most ruthless, evidence-backed, no-holds-barred dismantling ever witnessed in the annals of American political television. She arrived armed with a barrage of verbal insults, while he arrived armed with a simple manila folder. Only one of them was still standing when the broadcast finally concluded. The showdown took place at a Fox News town hall located in New York City. The stage featured two distinct podiums, positioned exactly 12 feet apart from one another. The room was packed with 400 seated audience members, while a staggering 47 million viewers tuned in to watch the spectacle live from their homes. Omar made her entrance first, dressed professionally in a dark blazer, carrying a heavy leather portfolio that contained her notes, which were arranged with absolute surgical precision. Trump walked onto the stage just 4 short minutes before the cameras officially started rolling. He was carrying absolutely nothing but a single thin manila folder and a standard black Sharpie marker securely clipped to his breast pocket. He did not bring a massive binder, nor did he carry a yellow legal pad. All he brought were 30 printed pages and a felt-tip pen. Omar was granted the opportunity to speak first. For a full, uninterrupted 11 minutes, she unloaded every political attack she could muster. She aggressively called him a fascist, labeled him a convicted felon facing 34 counts, and continuously brought up the events of January 6th, the controversial Muslim travel ban, and the imagery of children in cages. She concluded her aggressive monologue with a dramatic finale, aiming her pointed finger squarely at Trump's chest. She declared him the most dangerous man in America, insisting that history would ultimately remember him as a tyrant who attempted to destroy everything the nation stands for. The upper seating gallery immediately erupted into loud cheers. The political commentators likely believed Omar was destroying Trump, but the situation was about to change drastically. Trump had not moved a single inch throughout her entire tirade. He stood perfectly still, with both hands resting firmly on the edges of his podium, his head slightly tilted as he watched her. He observed her with the calm demeanor of a seasoned general contractor watching an inexperienced house inspector completely miss a severely cracked foundation. When the loud applause from the audience finally died down, he calmly removed the cap from his black Sharpie. He scribbled something quickly on the front of his folder, held it up briefly, moving far too fast for the broadcast cameras to clearly capture the text, and then set it back down on the podium. He mockingly complimented her performance, noting that he had been eagerly wanting to have this confrontation ever since she screamed at him inside his Capitol. He tapped the manila folder purposefully and looked right past Omar, staring directly into the center television camera. He confidently stated that he didn't need a massive, heavy binder because the complete truth fit perfectly right there in those 30 pages. He boldly claimed that 30 pages were all it takes to expose the reality of the situation. Trump extracted a single sheet of paper from the manila folder. Utilizing his Sharpie, he aggressively wrote a massive figure across the top of the page, $2,900,000. He held the paper out toward the camera while the black ink was still visibly wet. That massive figure, he explained to the audience, was the exact amount of money her political campaign had paid out directly to her boyfriend's company, E Street Group. This company was owned and operated by a man named Tim Minette, and these massive payments occurred during a period when he was still legally married to another woman. Trump set the paper down on his podium face up, looking much like a casino dealer, confidently laying down a winning ace card. He proceeded to detail the situation, explaining that Minette's spouse, Beth Minette, had officially filed for divorce. In her sworn legal filing, she explicitly stated that her husband confessed to her that he was deeply in love with Ilhan Omar. Trump made it crystal clear that this wasn't just his own political rhetoric. That was the sworn testimony of Minette's wife, provided in a court of law under the strict penalty of perjury. Trump paused his speech, intentionally allowing the silent studio audience to fully absorb this scandalous revelation. He summarized the timeline for clarity. The campaign money was freely flowing into the boyfriend's company. The boyfriend simultaneously confessed his affair to his wife, and all the while, the Congresswoman was actively telling reporters that she was happily married to her own husband. He openly asked the audience if everybody was following the complex story so far. Omar quickly leaned into her microphone, adopting a defensive posture, and stated that the Federal Election Commission, FEC, had thoroughly investigated the matter and subsequently dismissed it. Trump's hand came up instantly to intercept her claim. It wasn't an aggressive stop gesture, but rather something resembling a traffic cop firmly redirecting the flow of vehicles. He countered forcefully, asserting that the FEC didn't dismiss anything whatsoever. He explained the bureaucratic reality. The FEC literally did not have enough appointed commissioners at the time to even legally hold a vote because the agency literally could not function. They couldn't process the case. He emphatically noted that an inability to get to a case is completely different from a legal dismissal, calling it a huge and fundamental difference. He then swiftly pulled another page from his folder. He detailed that in one single month, July 2020, her political campaign spent $66,000. A shocking 77% of that total amount was funneled directly to her boyfriend's company. He broke down the math for the viewers. That meant 77 cents out of every single donor dollar went to her romantic partner. If a dedicated supporter in Minneapolis sent her $20 because they genuinely believed in her cause, exactly $15.40 went straight into the boyfriend's pocket. He uncapped the Sharpie yet again, wrote 77% boldly under the first monetary figure, and held it up for everyone in the studio and at home to see clearly. But, Trump noted with a hint of sarcasm, the situation always gets better with her. He reached even deeper into his folder and produced what he described as a comprehensive summary of internal billing records. These specific records had been obtained by federal investigators from a cooperative former employee of E Street Group. This witness had gone straight to the Department of Justice because, as Trump put it, even her boyfriend's own employees knew that something highly unethical was happening. These internal records showed specific invoices that were billed directly to the political campaign for supposed consulting services. However, these services were billed on the exact dates when, according to official travel logs, she and Mr. Minette were actually on vacation together. These romantic getaways included a stay at a hotel in the Caribbean, a trip to a luxury resort in California, and a relaxing weekend in New York. Trump looked directly at Omar, stating that her loyal donors thought they were paying for crucial campaign advertisements, but in reality, they were funding her romantic holidays. He boldly declared that this practice was not consulting, rather it was blatant embezzlement protected only by a slightly better filing system. Omar's hands immediately moved to grip the sharp edges of her podium, her knuckles tightening and turning white behind her. Meanwhile, in the background, a staffer's phone screen lit up with a notification before quickly going dark again. Trump's voice then shifted to a lighter, almost amused tone as he introduced the next segment. It was the exact cadence he used at his massive rallies when he was about to deliver a devastating punchline that the crowd could see coming from a mile away. He declared it was time to talk about the magic trick. He detailed the business ventures of her husband, a winery located in California and a venture capital firm known as Rose Lake Capital. At the end of the year 2023, the combined total value of these entities was listed at exactly $700. That's not a business, that's a yard sale, Trump quipped sharply, writing $700 on the piece of paper. Exactly 1 year later, she filed her official congressional financial disclosure forms. Suddenly, those exact same companies possessed a brand new valuation, up to $30 million. He boldly wrote $30 million next to the tiny $700 figure. He noted that jumping from $700 to $30 million in a mere 12 months is not a normal return on investment. He joked that illusionist David Copperfield doesn't perform tricks that impressive, and that the famous duo Penn and Teller would be forced to retire if they saw it. He drew a thick connecting arrow between the two drastically different numbers. He then transitioned to the part of the story he claimed to really love. Once various people, including investigative reporters and oversight committee members, started asking serious questions about this massive, sudden wealth, she took immediate action. She filed an amended financial disclosure form. The new value she listed for the businesses was zero. He wrote a giant zero on the paper. He declared that the $30 million had magically become zero, calling it the greatest disappearing act in the history of the United States Congress. To compound the issue, she had explicitly told Business Insider in February, firmly on the public record, that she was not a millionaire. She claimed that reports regarding her immense wealth were simply right-wing disinformation. Yet her very own initial filing claimed she had $30 million, and her amended filing later claimed she had zero. Trump looked directly into the camera lens. The studio had grown so incredibly quiet that you could hear the subtle hum of the air conditioning system. He reminded everyone that she had previously called him a con man, yet he built actual, tangible buildings, tall skyscrapers that people can see and touch, featuring his name in massive gold letters. Meanwhile, she built a completely fabricated $30 million number that magically turned into zero. The very minute someone asked to look at the official receipts, he paused, pointing to himself, and mockingly asked, "I'm the con man, me?" He turned his focus back to Omar, demanding to know where the $30 million originated and where it subsequently vanished. He noted that he had been audited more times than any human being in recorded history, and he could account for every single dollar, challenging her if she could do the same. Omar's voice came out tight and heavily controlled as she attempted to defend herself. She claimed that her husband's business valuations were simply reported by his professional accountants, that it was merely an innocent filing error, and that they had corrected the mistake voluntarily. A $30 million filing error, Trump repeated, nodding his head slowly with the exact expression of a man pretending to consider a pathetic excuse that he had already thoroughly dismissed. He told her directly that a $30 million error is not a simple mistake. It is either a sign of gross incompetence or blatant, intentional fraud, demanding she pick one. He emphasized this point because she had signed that official disclosure form under the strict penalty of perjury. He slid the paper to the side of the podium so the written numbers faced the live audience. 3 million funneled to the boyfriend, 30 million appearing from thin air, and then poof, it was completely gone. Yet, despite all of this, she was the one possessing the audacity to call him a criminal. Shaking his head in disbelief, he noted that you can't make this stuff up, but actually she did make up 30 million, and then she frantically unmade it. Trump firmly closed the first section of his manila folder and deliberately opened the second. The entire temperature and atmosphere in the room instantly changed. The rally-style amusement completely drained from his face. What replaced it was something much harder and more serious. The stern expression of a man who had survived 4 massive indictments, 2 grueling impeachments, and $100 million in mounting legal fees, and yet still showed up to fight. He stated forcefully that he had been investigated more than any person in the entire history of the world. He listed the endless probes, Russia, the impeachments, the 34 counts in New York. They meticulously went through his taxes, his businesses, his phone calls, his children's businesses, and his lawyer's private files. They scrutinized 14 years of his tax returns and every single business deal he ever made. He held up one finger and declared powerfully, "But I never married my brother." The lower gallery, consisting overwhelmingly of enthusiastic Trump supporters, erupted loudly. The upper gallery, however, sat in rigid, stunned silence. Omar's eyes narrowed dangerously, and her legal counsel, seated closely behind her, leaned forward with visible concern. Trump lowered his voice by half a register, stating he wanted to be careful because these were incredibly serious allegations. He clarified he was not a judge or a prosecutor, but he was a guy who had been falsely accused of a lot of things, so he knew exactly what true innocence looks like. And innocent looks like releasing your records, he declared. He pulled out a single-page timeline featuring handwritten dates perfectly connected by arrows. In 2002, she enters a religious marriage with a man named Ahmed Hirsi, and they have 2 children together. In 2009, she legally marries an entirely different man, Ahmed Noor Saeed Elmi, a British citizen, while still remaining in her religious marriage with Hirsi. He tapped the page to emphasize the next point. In 2011, she formally separates from Elmi. In 2012, just 1 year later, she has a 3rd child. The father is Ahmed Hirsi, not her legal husband, Elmi. He looked directly at Omar, checking if she was still following along. Moving to 2014 and 2015, he noted that she filed joint federal tax returns with Hirsi, despite him not being her legal husband. He explained that federal IRS law strictly dictates you can only file jointly with your actual legal spouse. This wasn't just his personal opinion. This was documented federal law, resulting in her being formally fined $3,500 by the Minnesota Campaign Finance Board for these related violations. He noted this fact is not disputed and remains permanently on the public record. Setting the timeline down, he moved to 2017. 6 full years after officially separating, she finally divorced Elmi, then immediately married Hirsi, then subsequently divorced Hirsi again, and finally married Tim Minette, the boyfriend from the earlier segment. He summarized the utter chaos: 3 overlapping husbands, fraudulent tax filings with the wrong man, and one massive, looming question that had been asked for 8 long years. Trump paused dramatically, letting the entire room wait in suspense. Is Ahmed Elmi her brother? The upper gallery stirred uneasily. A senator's aide sitting in the back row audibly exhaled, and the moderator shifted uncomfortably in his chair. Trump admitted candidly that he didn't know the final answer. He didn't possess the birth certificate, nor had he seen a DNA test. But he revealed exactly what he did know. He pulled out an official document from North Dakota State University records. These records showed that when Ahmed Elmi filled out his emergency contact form, he explicitly listed Ilhan Omar as his primary contact. Under the relationship category on the form, in his own handwriting, he clearly wrote sister. Trump held the document up to camera 2 for the viewers at home to see. He further noted that he also knew Elmi, Omar, and Hirsi all attended the exact same university at the exact same time, lived in the exact same cities, and were all officially registered at the exact same Minneapolis apartment address. Setting the document down, Trump looked at Omar with the absolute directness of a man who had successfully negotiated ruthless real estate deals in Manhattan for 40 straight years. He made her a live, very public offer, release her immigration records that very night on live television, and authorize the Department of Homeland Security to make them fully public. If the records showed nothing illicit, he promised to admit he was wrong, loudly, on Fox News, Truth Social, and everywhere else. The studio let out a short, incredibly tense laugh. Omar did not laugh. Trump warned her that if she refused to release the records and instead chose to just sit there calling the allegations racist, rather than simply answering the question, the American people would rightfully draw their own undeniable conclusions. He pointed out that he had answered everything, every subpoena, every deposition, every single audit, making him the most open book in political history. He noted that even the legal Somali American immigrants in her own district who followed every rule and filed every form were demanding answers. This, he insisted, was about necessary paperwork, not race. Omar's voice cut through the room at a higher pitch than before, furiously calling the claims a racist smear that had been fully debunked. Trump tapped the podium twice with his index finger, correcting her terminology on the spot. He explained that debunked means showing concrete evidence that makes a false story completely fall apart, whereas denied simply means saying no and refusing to prove it. She had merely denied the claims for 8 years, never truly debunking them. Closing the second tab of his folder, Trump pulled out a newspaper clipping and held it up for the audience. It featured a headline about Amy Bach, who was sentenced to a staggering 41 years in federal prison as the ringleader of the Feeding Our Future fraud. Trump noted this was the largest pandemic fraud case in American history. An unbelievable $9 billion, perhaps even more, was stolen directly from federal programs specifically designed to feed hungry, vulnerable children in her home state and in her specific district. He emphasized that this massive theft wasn't executed by unknown strangers. It was done by people she personally knew, people from her community, and individuals directly connected to her own political network. He then produced a second document, a detailed summary of an 84-page report from the bipartisan Minnesota House Fraud Prevention Committee, which had been released just 3 weeks prior. The committee's own words concluded that Omar's legislation, the Meals Act, effectively took the necessary protective guardrails entirely off the federal nutrition program. She had successfully inserted this provision into the 2020 Coronavirus Response Act, which allowed for-profit restaurants into the federal program and permitted unverified grab-and-go pickups. Trump plainly stated she built the door and the fraudsters simply walked right through it to steal the money. When the committee formally invited her to testify, she didn't show up. When they formally asked for her records, she completely ignored them. When they tried to subpoena her, her fellow Democrats blocked the vote. Omar interrupted, claiming her provision was signed into law by Trump himself. Trump quickly dismantled this weak defense, noting he signed a massive $2 trillion emergency bill spanning thousands of pages during an unprecedented global pandemic. Her specific highly destructive provision was buried deeply on page 400 something. She wrote it, she knew exactly what it did, and her community used it to steal billions. Trump gently pulled out a single sheet of handwritten paper on lined notebook paper, holding it with both hands. It was a heartfelt letter from a woman named Fatima, a legal Somali American immigrant residing in Omar's district. Fatima's 2 children were enrolled in a legitimate meal program that tragically lost its funding because the money had been entirely stolen. Her kids lost their lunches because people in Omar's political orbit stole $9 billion, yet Omar carelessly dismissed the entire investigation as mere confusion and chaos. Trump read Fatima's heartbreaking words aloud to the nation, detailing how she came to America, followed every rule, and filed every form, only to watch her children go hungry because the people supposed to help stole the money instead. She pleaded for help because her congresswoman wouldn't even answer basic questions about the theft. Trump set the letter down, his jaw visibly tightening for a moment. The showman persona completely vanished, replaced by a man genuinely infuriated that $9 billion was stolen from vulnerable children. Trump shifted topics seamlessly without transition, just as he did at his rallies. He recalled her March 2019 CARE banquet speech, where she notoriously described the horrific events of September 11th, where 2,977 innocent Americans were murdered by 19 al-Qaeda terrorists as simply some people did something. She described the massive tragedy like it was a minor parking lot fender bender. Speaking with a devastatingly quiet tone, Trump recounted being in Manhattan on 9/11, watching the massive towers fall, personally losing friends, and sending workers to help with the tragic aftermath. He stated he had never, not once in his entire life, heard an American reduce that horrific day to some people did something until she did it. He displayed a poignant photograph of Nicholas Harros Jr. standing at Ground Zero. Harros, whose mother was tragically murdered in the World Trade Center, wore a T-shirt bearing Omar's callous words, demanding an apology she stubbornly never provided. Sweeping his hand across the podium, Trump then brought up her extensive documented record of anti-Semitism. He listed her inflammatory statements, claiming Israel had hypnotized the world, the all about the Benjamins remark, and various dual loyalty accusations. She aggressively compared the U.S. and Israel to terror groups like Hamas and the Taliban, and labeled Jewish students at Columbia University as pro-genocide. Her toxic actions resulted in 4 major incidents in 5 years, ultimately pushing the House to vote 47-23 to officially condemn anti-Semitism. Over 400 members of her own party finally said enough was enough. Looking into the camera with flat disbelief, he summarized her appalling record: $9 billion stolen from children, 9 over 11 reduced to something, and Jewish Americans attacked continuously until her own party condemned her. Yet despite this entire record, she possessed the nerve to stand in Congress and call him a murderer. He turned to her and asked, "Who's the dangerous one, Representative? Really, who?" Omar gripped the podium, her knuckles blanching under the intense studio lights, and accused him of exploiting tragedy for political gain. Trump shot back immediately that he was merely reading her own exact words in official committee reports. If her record exploited tragedy, that was entirely her problem, not his. Clicking a small black presentation remote, Trump directed everyone's attention to the large monitor. A video began playing showing a hotel ballroom in Minneapolis on the 27th of January, 2024. Ilhan Omar was standing before rows of Somali Americans, speaking passionately in the native Somali language. English subtitles from a conservative translation that Elon Musk had publicly deemed treasonous scrolled visibly at the bottom. The controversial translation read, "We are Somalians first, Muslims second. Sleep in comfort knowing I am here to protect the interests of Somalia from inside the U.S. system. The U.S. government will do what we tell the U.S. government to do." After letting it play for 30 seconds in complete silence, Trump froze the screen on her face mid-sentence. He quietly repeated her words, "Protecting the interests of Somalia from inside the U.S. system." He then produced the official United States naturalization oath, which she took upon becoming a citizen, which requires absolutely renouncing all allegiance and fidelity to any foreign state or sovereignty. She swore that solemn oath, yet boldly told a ballroom she would protect a foreign nation from inside the U.S. government. Omar frantically claimed the translation was inaccurate and completely debunked. Trump effortlessly countered by producing a certified document from 3 independent native Somali court interpreters with 0 political affiliation, who completely agreed on the translation's core substance. He added that even if they used her own office's preferred translation regarding a naval agreement, it still clearly showed her actively using her U.S. congressional seat to conduct foreign policy on behalf of Somalia. Stepping closer to center stage, moving into the same camera frame, Trump delivered his final fatal blow. He recalled the State of the Union, stating that he saw a woman scream at him, not out of genuine moral outrage, but out of absolute sheer terror. She was screaming because she finally got caught, because he was actively talking about the missing $9 billion and the massive fraud, and because the investigations were rapidly closing in and she was running out of rooms to walk out of rooms to flee from. Omar aggressively pushed her chair back, the harsh scraping sound cutting through the live microphone feed like a sharp blade. She declared furiously she would not stand there and be called a traitor by a man who incited an insurrection. Trump gestured downward with the absolute authority of a man who had fired people on television for 14 seasons, and he meant it. He commanded her to sit down, reminding her that she had her turn to scream and walk out. But now he was talking, and he finally had the receipts. Ignoring the moderator's desperate warning that there were 4 minutes remaining, Omar's staff quickly gathered her belongings. As she walked away, Trump spoke directly to her back, mocking her for walking away just like she walked out of the State of the Union, and just like she walks away every single time someone asks about her brother, her money, and her loyalty. As she reached the exit, tracked by 6 high-definition cameras capturing her retreat, Trump's voice echoed across the studio with a final chilling warning: walking away is what you do best. But here's the thing about investigations. They don't walk away with you. The heavy studio door firmly closed. The studio held its collective breath. Trump stood entirely alone on the stage for 5 long seconds in front of 400 people and 47 million viewers. He stared intently at her vacant podium, observing the abandoned notes, the heavy leather portfolio left behind in her frantic hurry, and a pen that had rolled onto the floor. Looking directly into the camera, his rally persona entirely gone, he stated quietly that he answers every single investigation and audit as the most investigated man in history, yet she couldn't survive a single town hall. Picking up his thin 3-0-page folder containing everything that mattered, he noted she walked out, but the investigation wouldn't, before nodding once and deliberately exiting the stage. The clip of her hasty exit went incredibly viral, hitting 112 million views across platforms in just the first 48 hours. Her abandoned portfolio was heavily likened to forgotten evidence at a crime scene. Omar walks out, and Somalia first trended globally for 3 full days. The $9 billion figure rapidly became a cultural shorthand for corrupt politicians screaming racism to deflect accountability. Trump's line about walking away metastasized into a massive meme format within hours. Omar released a 2-minute and 40-second pre-recorded video exactly 36 hours later. She deflected completely, calling the event a coordinated racist spectacle designed to dehumanize a black Muslim woman. She heavily cited death threats, brought up her refugee story, and reminded viewers of Trump's 34 felonies. Crucially, she answered absolutely 0 questions about the East Street Group payments, the $30 million discrepancy, the massive fraud report, the Somalia speech, or her hidden immigration records. Her 8-year pattern of deflection had finally stopped working entirely because numbers simply don't care about narrative frames. The institutional political machinery turned against her faster than her team could contain. House Minority Leader Hakeem Jeffries gave a coldly neutral statement encouraging financial transparency, effectively throwing her out of a lifeboat without making eye contact. The squad offered weak solidarity strictly about her identity, but reporters quickly noted none of them defended her actual legislative or financial record. The House Oversight Committee expanded its scope and officially issued subpoenas for Tim Mynette's business records. The House Ethics Committee opened a formal review into the $30 million disappearing act, and the DOJ investigation aggressively accelerated as the massive public attention made continued delays politically untenable. In Minnesota, the structural damage was absolute. Her approval rating in the 5th District crashed 11 points and plummeted 19 points among voters over 50. Amina Farah, a Somali-American CPA and primary challenger with 2 decades of experience, raised $3.8 million in small donations in just 2 weeks. Farah's campaign video mocked Omar's financial incompetence, stating as an accountant she knew what $30 million in zero looked like, and the community deserves someone who could accurately count. Progressive media completely abandoned her, with Vox and left-leaning podcasts focusing heavily on the pressing need for financial accountability. Legally, Mynette's Rose Lake Capital was placed on a Treasury Department watch list for shady wire transfers, his winery quietly dissolved, and formal complaints demanding full audits under penalty of perjury were filed. Her lucrative speaking fees entirely evaporated overnight. In Minneapolis, Fatima Abdi sat in her apartment, watching Omar's empty response video, which ignored the starving children and stolen billions. Fatima closed the application. Listening to her own children playing, she opened her phone, searched for Amina Farah's campaign, and donated $25. This is the ultimate consequence of launching baseless accusations at an opponent armed with undeniable proof. She brought fury. He brought a manila folder. She fled the stage, he held his ground, and the legal repercussions followed her straight home. Hit the like button if this moment of accountability resonated with you. Subscribe for more instances where the truth prevails, and comment your favorite moment below. Turn on notifications, because Ilhan Omar's legal and political nightmares are only just beginning. God bless the veterans, the rule-abiding immigrants, the taxpayers, and the children who lost their meals, and God bless everyone who believes an oath to this country actually matters. She walked out, the truth walked in, and it's far from over.